talking about how we help regional students overcome various barriers that exist and say yes to university. For many students, the path to university is still shaped by a lot of different barriers: geographic, financial, social, cultural, from the cost of living pressures, the loneliness of living away from home. The student experience can feel like it's not designed with them in mind. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Elissa Newall. I'm a senior partner at Edified. We're a research and consulting company who specialises in the education sector. My family and I had the pleasure of living in a regional Victorian town the last 2 years in a place called Nagambie. It had 2,000 people in the town, 150 kids at the local primary school and no high school for, as far as the eye could see. That was a real eye-opener to me as a city person to go and have that experience with my family, and it really brought home for me the reality of life living in regional Australia and the significant kind of gaps that exist, and I can really understand why we don't see as many regional kids in our universities as we would like. Everyone on the panel today has their own personal experience of living and working or working in regional Australia, and I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute. So some stats just to make sure we're all on the same page. So you may know that young people in regional Australia are only half as likely to gain a university degree than their metro peers. You've probably heard Minister Clare speaking often about breaking down the invisible barrier that stops people from the bush getting a crack at university. One of a kind of favourite phrase. And of course, that's baked into the targets and the ideals that are set in the university's accord. And we're looking to lift the proportion of rural and regional students in undergrad degrees from 1 in 5 today to 1 in 4 by 2035 and parity by 2050. So that push occurs while we're also expanding the overall pool of students who are coming into university. So we're not just trying to have more regional students, but more overall as well. And that's not going to happen without effort. Our panel today is made up of practitioners, people who are already doing things that are working, that are making headway, and maybe some things that you don't know about. It might give you some ideas or some interesting perspectives to take back to your own work. So allow me to introduce the panel. First, we have Jan Clausey. Jan's the Director of Marketing and Growth at Federation University. She's born and bred in a regional town and spent the bulk of her career in metro universities and some side stints at offshore branch campuses. She moved to Federation Uni 2 years ago and leads their growth strategy, which involves a strong commitment to growing opportunities for regional students. Next, we have Elise McNish. Yes, can't see who the audit. Yes, and she's a regional equity advisor at La Trobe. And she spent the past 6 years working on specialised regional programs at La Trobe in Bendigo, where she's lived for the last 12 years. She believes there's a really big opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And one of the things that she's been really proud of working on is Victoria's first end-to-end rural medical program. Next, we have Xanthia Jensen, and Xanthia is the Sales and Partnerships Manager at Igloo Student Accommodation. Also someone hailing from regional Australia. She's a passionate advocate for student success and access to education, and she plays a key role in overseeing Igloo's regional scholarship program. And lastly, we have Paula Soon, also a former regional university student and first in family. She's the Director of Admissions and Client Services at VTAC. And with 2 decades of experience working in TAFE and unis, she's now working on the VTAC side, where the Equity and Scholarship Scheme provide vital support to regional and rural applicants. So as you can see, we've got a lot of experience in the room, and it's my pleasure to be hosting this conversation with you all today. Kind of divided the panel into a few different themes, and we'll kind of dig into them, and then at the end there'll be some time for questions. So distance. It's a really obvious one. It tends to be the first challenge that comes to mind when we think about regional students. So getting to university isn't just about getting into the course. Often it means leaving home. Yes, of course, there are regional universities and many students do choose those, but for those travelling to cities, those students don't have the privilege of living at home rent-free, perhaps, like their city peers do. They face the challenge of securing housing in a tight rental market, really high cost of living, moving to a place where they don't know everyone, and often supporting themselves while they go and do all that. So Xanthia, I'm going to start with you. Igloo has a really great scholarship program that people may not know about that's kind of come about to bridge the gap for regional students. So can you tell us how it works and kind of what that impact has been so far?
Yeah, certainly. So our Igloo Regional Scholarship Program we established back in 2020. And the idea of the scholarship is really to provide rental support to students relocating out of regional Australia into Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, where we operate accommodation buildings. And so we support those students that are first-year university students or undertaking their first year of a tertiary study through rental assistance in that first year. And in terms of impact, I mean, I'm really fortunate in my role as Sales and Partnerships Manager to speak to a lot of parents and students and really understand the impact. I mean, I think for parents, that's knowing that their student that might be the first in family relocating into the city for university is living in safe, secure and supportive accommodation. And then for our students or for our residents, it's knowing that they're surrounded by a lot of people that are in a similar age and stage of that sort of education, that next step in their education experience, and knowing that they can feel really comfortable in their living environment through rental support. They're not having to sort of juggle as many hours of work as perhaps they would have needed to if they hadn't have otherwise received rental assistance. And we hear from a lot of students as well that this is the turning point for them that means that they can relocate from regional Australia into the city for university. So it's been really, I think, special to be a part of a lot of students' journeys over the last, call it 5 years of this scholarship program being a part of our sort of Igloo offering.
And how do you get the word out there, Xanthia? I guess it's a great program, but for it to succeed, you've surely got to cover a lot of ground within Australia. What sort of tactics are working for you getting the word out?
Yeah, certainly. So a lot of engagement at regional careers expos, university open days has been a really good opportunity to touch base with schools, parents, students, and just educate them about purpose-built student accommodation. So obviously a lot of regional students know a lot about colleges. They're familiar with obviously the private rental market, but educating them about alternate opportunities that exist in the support and structured environment of purpose-built student accommodation, which Igloo offers. And then as well as that, we've done a lot of work working with key stakeholders, so like universities, again, to sort of work with them to educate them about the offering of the scholarship program.
Thank you. It's one example that when I heard about that, that was news to me. And I think there's all these little fantastic drops in the ocean that together, will come together to solve some of these challenges. Thanks, Xanthia. I'm going to kind of follow that theme around affordability, and a scholarship is definitely part of that. For many regional students, the decision to go to uni is actually a financial one. There's a real reality to it. Whether to go and get a job straight after school and earn an income that is accessible right there and could be really essential for their family or other responsibilities they have, versus struggling through maybe 3 or 4 years of study where they don't have a lot of support and they might not have that financial backing from their family. So Paula, I know that you've got some interesting data through VTAC. Can you help us understand kind of the reality of this financial challenge? What is it that you're seeing from VTAC's side of things?
Okay. Did we have my slide?
It's up.
Oh, yeah, great. Okay, so I'll just talk through. It's really interesting what we're able to find as part of, and this is mostly current year 12 information as well. So we're talking last year's data. So this really comprises about 55,000 or 56,000 students in the metro area and about 12,000 of the regional and rural. So when we're able to look at the data, if I can look at the data, so. The metro applications are, of course, you would probably already assume that they're mostly high SES with 72.5%, being in that bracket. Only 27.5% are the ones that come from the low SES. Now, if you compare that to the regional and rural, it's almost flipped, with 71.1%, which comprises about 8,000 out of 11,000 students who are identifying as low SES. So to the opportunity to have a scholarship and to be able to be reached, to be able to make university attractive, these numbers are real, and this is a reality of our regional and remote students that we're seeing applying through VTAC. I guess one of the things that we're able to do, and many of you would be aware of this, but because I'd worked in TAFEs and universities for a long time, it was only when I started working here that I became hyper aware of the Equity and Scholarships, which was formerly known as SEAS program. So there's 4 elements to this particular, it's a scheme as part of the application form. So there's 4 sections to the scheme. And forgive me for those who are super familiar with this. I know there's some faces in the crowd that would know this well. One of the categories is around location. So location attracts a different, I guess students refer to it as boost points to their ranking in terms of their competitiveness when admissions teams make selection decisions. There's a bunch of things that are in that category. It's not just location, but it's personal details, age, indigeneity, living and school, so where you live or where your school is located, particularly underrepresented schools. So all of these different things are taken into consideration when universities, TAFEs and private institutions make decisions about which students they'll admit. And each institution awards different ranking points in order to make those applicants more competitive. There's different sections too. There's financial hardship, living with a disability or medical condition, or difficult family and life circumstances. So often we'll see students from the second column applying for all 4 of those categories. So the idea of this scheme is to ensure that students that are coming from regional and remote are definitely acknowledged for those impacts for distance and other things such as financial circumstances.
Thanks, Paula. The numbers are pretty stark, and I think that's sort of a myth, or, you know, sometimes we have these things that are hearsay, but when you put a number to it and you see that flip, it's a real challenge that needs to be, that road needs to be, river needs to be bridged, something needs to be crossed to be able to get to the other side. Jen, you're kind of seen the human side of this in your work at Federation. What sort of stories do you hear from students and parents about how affordability is a barrier, and what exciting stuff is Federation doing with the co-op to help kind of solve that?
Yeah, so we do. I mean, this is something that we hear all the time from students, that, and it is, we do a brand tracker as well, and we know from our brand tracker that affordability is the #1 barrier to go to university. It's a little bit different across our different regions, so we really feel it. It's very palpable in Gippsland, but less so in Ballarat. So I think it can be a little bit different across different regional areas. To give you an example, to give some context, I think at Fed this year we enrolled 3.5 times more direct students than school leavers. So it's really those VTAC school leaver students who have this sense that they can't afford university. So the bulk of our students go out and work, maybe have some money, and then they come in and make that decision. They understand that they need university or want to study at university. They tend to be women, they've got children, and they only really study part-time. So our barrier has been this idea around, I can't afford it. And they are really the year 12 students, or the students coming straight from school. It's just incomprehensible to them. So as a part of that, the university has established our cooperative education model, which was referred to this morning. This is something that I think is a really well-known model in places like Canada, but less so here. And I know that lots of universities do something similar. But I think one of the things about our model is that the students obviously do what they do, a 1 unit or subject, depending on which university. Everyone has all these different things, don't they? Some's a unit, sometimes it's a course, sometimes it's a subject. We're calling it a unit. And they do a sort of a professional prac unit, which helps them understand the world of work. And then during their course, they get a 60-day work placement. That's for credit, that's paid. Now, that does provide financial, a means to students financially. But really importantly, the benefit I see most from that is that these kids don't have networks. There's no school tie to get them a job, or even to know how to even appreciate how to get a job. So it's a very curated experience for the students where they have a case manager and they help them get that job. And we have, and the other part of this, which is really great for regions, is that it's providing opportunities for industry to actually have students stay. So it's relatively new, and of course it's not going to be in all courses because some already have placements like nursing and education courses, but in all the other courses we're rolling that out now. Yeah. So we hope it to be. We really hope it will inspire students to make it more worthwhile. Yeah.
Is there anything you could tell us? Like, is it sort of changing the conversations, or is it putting something new on the table when maybe people are considering the upfront cost, the return on investment, whether the study will be worth it?
Yeah.
Does this come into the mix, and what do people say?
In reality, I mean, it's relatively new, so we've just got our first cohorts in. But yes, I think, and also I've got students probably it's a little bit what, but with parents, it's definitely something that they've gone, oh, well, that makes sense. Because most of our students are first in family as well, and parents want to be able to see that connection between, like, what's their return on investment? That sounds terrible, but that's really what they're thinking about, is my kid going to get a job? And how does my kid get a job? So I think that we are beginning to see an uplift. And I suppose what we'll know next year whether our VTAC numbers are up. But I think, you know, it's going to take some time, but we're very confident, and industry are all over it. Yeah. So we're really pleased. Yeah.
Thank you. Very good. We're going to kind of keep moving on to another challenge that often comes up, which is that saying yes can be complex when the map isn't clear. If we don't know what the path is or what the road looks like, it's very hard to take those steps and follow. So it's a bit of a myth that regional students don't have the desire or the interest to go to university. It's something that you sometimes hear just thrown about in conversations. But the barrier is actually more likely around that kind of confidence and the practicalities of access. So first in family students, as we've talked about, you know, they kind of don't have those role models, that guidance in their home to help them navigate the system. Key influencers might be people in their schools or their broader network might not actually recommend university. They might not know what the different pathways and avenues are if the student isn't taking a really traditional kind of route. Some students, they face structural barriers at school. So whether that's not having specialist teachers, limited subject choices, these sorts of things can impact the actual results, not meeting prerequisites or certain hurdle requirements, and being unable to kind of navigate how to get around that. Elise, I'm going to throw to you because I know you have tons of stories of students who have kind of run into these kind of brick walls all the time. Is there one that you'd like to share with us to kind of illustrate this?
Yeah, I definitely have plenty of students that I've spoken to. Actually, this week spoke to a student who's only wants to be a chef because mum's boyfriend's best friend owns the pub in Swan Hill, and that's something that seems achievable to them. So I think really from our perspective, it's a lot about that education piece and showing, well, you can't be what you can't see. And especially for these students with first in family, it's extremely difficult. I do have two beautiful stories that really do stick with me day to day. Running the rural medical program for a number of years, we really focus on that regional student aspiration building piece. And one of our students, she rode the tractor to and from school in Port for years and was well known within the town as going to and from school on tractor. So that's like a beautiful story of, you know, it's not the traditional bus route, and, you know, she was going back and forth in that untraditional sense. But one in particular that I do think of on the weekly is a student who was in Swan Hill. He and his family were escaping domestic violence, so there was a lot of pressure on them to get out into a safe zone. They found a really beautiful community, and he thought that maybe dentistry might be something that he could consider, and that's not something that they knew anyone in that field at all. The mum and the children were really struggling financially as well, so sometimes the mother would not eat so that she could afford to give her son a really nutritious meal so that he could get through his
schooling. And then he actually eventually got the highest score that his school has ever seen to be able to get into our dental program. And we've really worked on lowering entry requirements for that program, because within his school, they didn't do chemistry. They were doing chemistry via correspondence, and they didn't do biology. And nor did this family have the means to pay for a UCAT test or a GAMSAT test for the student to sit. So when you think about these sorts of barriers that these students are facing, if we can remove some of these barriers, and oh my gosh, he will be a fantastic dentist. I'll be booking in straight away when he does graduate at the end of this year. So there are definitely some beautiful stories like that that stick with me all the time and give me that strength to know that what we are doing is actually really making a difference. And he will be going back to his local town in Swan Hill to practice, and that's his sort of dream, to give back to that remote community.
Thank you. And I know you've got some beautiful clips that we'll put up at the end about kind of you can't be what you can't see. And I know you've been pretty active in that space. I want to touch base with you, Paula, next. I know you've got some more data to show about this overlap. We keep seeing this overlap of multiple factors. It's not just your location. It is often layers and layers of other barriers or challenges as well. So we're going to have a little look at first in family.
Yep. So again, back to the students that we see. It's quite a large number of students. So on the left, we're talking around 56,000 students, and again around 12,000 on the right. So as we can see, the majority of students are not first in family across the board. But on the right, that 10.5% of first in family of regional and remote is double what it is in a metro. So there is a lot more first in family. I mean, it's really encouraging to see that there is a very large percentage of students that are not first in family, but it is double that in metro. So, so it is backed by the data and the anecdotal stories and all of the support that's actually been generated over many decades. And I have to say that when I was researching and really thinking deeply about this particular session, I realised, and probably not at the time when I was a high school student, I was also first in family and a regional student. And my limited network, it was so limited that when I finished year 12, I worked in a paper box factory just for a summer. And I was so depressed by that and so limited in my options that I actually went back and repeated year 12 because I did not know what else to do. So I got 2 VCEs, and then I ended up going on to university just because I think it was the teachers at the school that could see that I wanted to continue to study, but this still persists. There's still so many stories like this that students that are not connected don't have networks, and we can certainly see that in the data. So yeah, it's so important for all universities, providers, TAFEs and private institutions to be able to make those allowances to be able to support these students.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, I was talking with one of my neighbours recently who herself back, many years ago studied as a regional student at Deakin in Warrnambool. And when she finished year 12, her family didn't know, and she didn't know. They knew she couldn't afford to go to university, couldn't afford to live there, would have had to move on campus, but just literally had no idea how to bridge that gap. So she spent months and months just kind of, working a bit of a part-time thing, trying to figure it out until somehow she found someone who gave her the advice. You need to earn this amount of money so you can qualify to be independent from your family, so you can qualify for youth allowance, so you can go and pay for your accommodation. But that took her, wasted her time, and she maybe had not had that conversation, might not have found that kind of route to getting there. So there's all these practicalities around navigating the path. Elissa, La Trobe has done, you've already alluded to it, but La Trobe has done some really great work, made some inroads around simplifying entry requirements and reducing prerequisites and tests. What's one big change that you've made, and how difficult was it to get approved internally?
I think poor academics. They struggle sometimes to get their head around what has been in the past and what they went through. They want the students to sort of go through that. So it has been a really huge education piece with our academics in particular to get them on board. I've got a slide up there of some beautiful stories that we put out in the media and really helped to use the media to put out into these remote communities, a bit about our rural medical program in particular and how you can't be what you can't see. So showing these local students' faces, putting them out there to show, because you know the local students in Mildura, they're quite well known, Duxers of Mildura Secondary College, of Shepparton Secondary College out there. And so we utilised that to our advantage. We've introduced with our rural medical program only has a prerequisite of English. That's it. No biology, no chem, no maths, none of that. We were finding that when we have students come into first year, we're essentially reteaching the first 12 weeks into year 12 bio or chemistry. So if a student can sit that, that's fantastic, but it's not a necessity requirement because we can reteach that. We have the supports in place to support those students with extra help in biology if we need to. So that's been one education piece, particularly around the academics. The other one is within extra tests and assessments. So other universities, I'm sure you're very familiar with, GAMSAT and UCAT and UMAT. Those tests are just so inaccessible for regional and remote students. There is the cost associated with them, the pressure of sitting those tests and then getting the score that you might need for a high achieving program, which already feels completely out of reach for these students. And then there's this barrier on top of that. So removing those tests was a huge negotiation internally to be able to explain the difference that it's making for the students to be able to apply and attract the pool of students that we're actually after. So, I mean, in a regional and rural community, the 99.95 ATAR students don't actually exist. The dux of a school might be a 70 ATAR if they're lucky, or 65. So we want to attract those students to come and study locally or in a regional area and support those students because they've actually done exceptionally well given their socioeconomic status, as Paul has sort of shown you. So that has been a huge thing internally. We have also tried to really increase our rural and remote offerings to students by offering scholarships based on ATAR achievement. So we know that if a student gets over an 80 ATAR, that is a massive, massive achievement, and not every school will have a DUX over that. So we've introduced something called the Regional Benefits Program, which gives students a guarantee, and I'll say that in exclamation marks. There's a couple of courses that are excluded from that, a guarantee entry into a program with a scholarship attached as long as they meet that 80 ATAR and the minimum subject prerequisites, which for the most part have been completely reduced across most of our regional courses to just English. We are still working through some other programs with some difficult history of extra prerequisites and really trying to reduce those wherever possible. We have not seen a difference in the student that we're outputting since we've reduced entry requirements to just English in dentistry and medicine, that they just have English on them compared to a course program like paramedicine or occupational therapy. Reducing those prerequisite requirements has not seen a dip in academic impact or anything. If anything, we've seen higher retention of regional and remote students, and hopefully then we will start to see, because these are quite long programs, a higher application of students in the regional and remote communities practicing as dentists and doctors.
Thank you. If that's not inspiring enough, I'm going to put one last kind of challenge to the panel. And we've spent a bit of time talking about the challenges and strategies, to address those. The final question is there a fresh idea or a new something that perhaps you're exploring or have just trialed that seems to be working and that you might like to offer to the audience for them to take back and try or think about at their institution? Maybe we'll start with you, Jan, and then we'll work our way down.
I'm gonna cheat and say two really quickly. The first one, because we've talked about that kind of financial the understanding or the lack of understanding of what it costs to come to university and what's available. And recently at our open day, we did create how do you finance university? It sounds like such a basic thing. But if you go to all your websites, and just think, how difficult is it for people to understand what you're putting out there for them? So really that simplification of the messaging around finances and how to finance a university degree, I think is really important, and everyone can just do that. And the second is, and we've talked about it, you can't be what you can't see. And so we have been developing, they're not glossy, but we have been developing small little videos of students who have succeeded and are at university or have a job, but we send that back to the school for the school to distribute on their socials or with their families. And it's not the ducks, because often that's just incomprehensible to those students that they will be that person, but people with just solid stories that are also aspirational, but sending that back to the school and dispersing that amongst the school family, I think is really important.
I think, as I mentioned, just rethinking your entry requirements. So are they a legacy requirement? Are they part of a requirement for the course? Unlikely, potentially. With that, we've been able to change our medical and dental programs. When you're thinking of the top tier programs that students are really driving for, we've completely reduced those entry requirements, and where we're trying to as well reduce the ATAR or entry requirements for those programs specifically for regional and remote students. So I think that would be my one main suggestion. From La Trobe perspective, we really haven't seen a difference in the student output. So that might be something that can really help break down barriers for regional and remote students coming to university, can make a really big difference for them and the regional communities, because that's ultimately who we're here to serve.
I think for us, creating communal spaces that students can spend time outside of just their apartment. So avoiding isolation, creating opportunity for them to come together and get to know each other. A really good example, we do a complimentary weekday breakfast. So every morning we've got staff that are interacting with our residents, but also it's just great to see them get out of their shells and interact with each other as they make a piece of toast. But just creating that opportunity for them to organically come together and sort of hopefully really make sure that they're not keeping to their apartments, becoming isolated, and just giving them the best opportunity, I think, to really succeed while they're transitioning out of home.
I'm going to end with two things too. So one is really about just bringing that awareness to that equity and scholarships scheme, which is part of the application form for any students that you might be working with or within your institutions, to know that this is such a really important tool to be able to ensure that regional and remote students, low SES, are recognised and appropriately accommodated for any impacts to their studies. The second bit is around the awareness. So VTAC over the past couple of years has really started to engage more visibly with institution partners, and we might have been at some or maybe all of your open days over the past couple of years, particularly this year. That gap between a student and then getting into university, be it via a direct application pathway or via VTAC, is so incredibly difficult to navigate if you don't know what you're looking for, a bit like the finances, the accommodation, how to navigate entry requirements. So going out there and speaking to families, I joined a couple of open days recently and really talking to the parents so they can then support their children or their friends and family and so on. So really to be able to demystify, and maybe not even demystify because it is complex in many instances, but to be able to provide that service, that ability to connect and that openness to work through the process to make it easier for applicants. So that's something just to, if we're not already connecting with you, then we would like to be able to do that to really make this process more easy to navigate.
Thank you. Some good practical tips. And I'm going to add one for myself, a little bit of a example from New Zealand. So New Zealand universities, a lot of students travel anyway to undertake their university studies, move from North to South Island, etc. So it's a little bit more of a culture of that, but still it's leaving home and it's going to an unknown location. So we know there's maybe about 5 universities who use a digital community platform. They're using it for the international student recruitment initially, about helping students make friends before they arrive on campus. But the penny dropped pretty quickly and thought, well, this is actually just as applicable for domestic students. So when students get their offer to study with the university, it comes with a link to join the platform, and they can see how many other people from their their town, their region, their area are also going to that university. And so that's, to me, I think a really interesting and these kind of themes that have come up has often been that those personal connections are the thing that's going to help bridge the gap. We've got to put all the practical things in place, but it's actually people, lots and lots of friendships, relationships, helping everyone along that journey that's going to help. So that's it from our panel. I think we've got about 7 minutes for some questions. Is that right, Tim? About seven? Yeah, okay. So feel free.
Just a question on the entry requirements. I come from an admissions background. You said you talked about the 12-week program if they haven't done the prerequisites like biology or chemistry as such. So can you share a bit more about what that is and the extra support that you provide so that they can pick up the course material?
Yeah, it's we've embedded it within the course material, so everyone's getting a refresher. So if you have sat that go off, yeah. If you have sat chemistry year 12 with the proper supports in place, it's actually a nice cruisy 12 weeks for you within the first element of the course. The supports in place, we actually hire student ambassadors through the library services. So we offer like math support, biology support and chemistry support. In the instance of the Bachelor of Biomedical Science medical program, so the rural medical pathway, we only have 15 students in that program. It's very, very limited. So we're really able to work one-on-one with those students if there are any barriers to the supports needed for those students. And for other programs where we've taken that off, so like dentistry, and we have quite a significant cohort within there, there are extra supports also offered through the Student Association. So the students are really working together and we're trying to encourage that collegiality. There honestly hasn't been that many issues at all with the students being able to get up to pace. I think that it's also a bit about the students are still achieving a really high ATAR for a regional and remote student. So they are really switched on and able to pick up some of these learnings quite quickly. And they are given in really small digestible formats so that it is easy to pick up the elements that they need specifically for that subject or for that course.
Question for you, Jan. Alex Brophy from Murdoch Uni. The cooperative model, we heard this morning about the hollowing out of entry-level jobs by virtue of adoption of AI. Is there any consideration or overlap of that with this model in terms of, I guess, replicating the experience that people might get from those entry-level jobs and potentially providing that as part of paid work during the course? So when they leave university, they're actually coming in at the next level where there is greater prevalence of jobs for graduates?
Yeah, actually, that is a very good point. I might take that down. Yeah, no, there has been some discussion, and it at the moment it's actually really in the industries around actually IT and engineering and our science programs. So we're just about to graduate the first lot of those students. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. But we are, and having these discussions today around, what are those jobs of the future and what is going to happen is definitely there. But at this stage, our market is so immature in many ways that we've actually got to catch up before that's even an issue, if that makes sense in those local communities. We're steps behind. Yeah. It will be. We're very excited about the contribution it's going to make to the local communities itself, and that retention of local talent. Whether or not the kinds of work changes, the retention of that local talent and the population, I think, is really important, particularly for Gippsland.
Tracy from the University of Technology, Sydney here, formerly of the University of Newcastle. I don't have a question, I just wanted to thank you for the brilliant work that you do.